So let's say we're determined never to lose an election again no matter what. What would you do? Well, the left has thought about it. They've got a new strategy to permanently solidify Democratic majorities. If this does not involve persuading new people to vote for them, Democrats would rather enact policies that would make it impossible for anyone but a Democrat to get elected. Stephen Law is president of the Senate Leadership Fund, and he detailed their plans in a column for the Wall Street Journal recently. We're happy to have him with us tonight. Mr. Law, thank you very much for coming on. So what is the plan to make structural changes to ensure a permanent majority?
Well, you know, as you look at Washington, it's easy to get mesmerized by the Green New Deal and Medicare for All and abolishing ICE. But what's behind all that shock and awe, as you said, is a very methodical plan to try to lock in a majority. And it starts with H.R. 1, which was the first bill that Speaker Pelosi introduced. You know, the first bill you introduced is symbolically important. You know, for Speaker Ryan, it was a tax bill. But for Speaker Pelosi, it was a bill to federalize state election systems, to make it very, very hard to impose registration deadlines. You have to register anybody as young as 16 years old. Felons can vote after they get out of prison. And then beyond that, for the first time ever, the House went on record in favor of D.C. statehood, which then could create a larger Senate with 2 additional Democratic senators and a larger majority for them to start a new Congress with.
They live in D.C., though.
Yes,
so they know it's the most dysfunctional functioning city in the world, but they still want it to become a state. So they're totally cynical, is what you're saying. Yeah,
well, precisely. I mean, I think if they can create more states that would produce Democratic senators, they've not only talked now about the District of Columbia, which Senator Chuck Schumer endorsed, but they're already talking now about statehood for Puerto Rico, potentially what they call full voting rights for Guam and other territories, which ultimately means statehood. So you could start with a small Democratic majority in the Senate and instantly expand it by the addition of more stars on the U.S. flag, more states, all of whom would be more Democratic
senators. Are they making
senators.
an affirmative argument about how this would make the country better? How America would be improved by this? Or is it just naked power politics?
Well, I think, you know, it's all encased in this argument about enfranchisement. You know, we're helping people get the right to vote, self-representation, just like it shows in all of the D.C. You know, bumper stickers and all that. But really what they're trying to do is to create impediments to Republicans ever getting back in power should we lose control in 2020. And as I said, the start of it is by changing state, not just federal, state election laws, weaponizing the Federal Election Commission to go after people who criticize federal officials, even on policy. Then you create more states. And then I think the thing that's really the ultimate centerpiece, and this sounds like it could never happen, but it's being talked about very seriously, and that is to pack the Supreme Court, to actually expand the size of the Supreme Court so that the narrow balance of power that's currently there would suddenly be tilted radically in one direction and stay that way potentially for a very long time.
I hope Republicans are awake and concerned. They should be. Steve Law, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So here now, Britt Hume, Fox News senior political analyst. Britt, you've been listening to this conversation about what's going on the Democratic side of the aisle. What do you think?
Well, I think those two guys make all kinds of sense, Martha. But I wouldn't, and despite the survey information that you mentioned, no, I agree that Twitter users may not constitute the bulk of either party, but make no mistake about it, the energy of the Democratic Party is on the left right now, and to some extent the farther left the better, which explains why Amy Klobuchar isn't getting a lot of media, because she doesn't make a lot of news, and, you know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her ideological allies are making the news, and they're the ones that excite people. And you see the applause that someone like her generates in meetings and so on, and you get a sense that there's something real about that. And Ed Rendell is right to worry that that would drive the Democratic Party into a bad place.
I mean, you get into a sort of a cycle where you've got the media and folks in Washington and everybody who spends a lot of time on Twitter, you know, feeding each other and feeding the media and feeding these sound bites and putting things on Twitter. But it is, I think, eye-opening to look at those graphics and realize that so many people do not participate in any of that at all. And the parties ignore that at their peril.
Well, they do, Martha, and there's a real danger. I think the danger in the case of the Democratic Party is a general election danger, because an awful lot of people that don't pay a lot of attention to primaries and you know, might vote either way in a general election They're the ones that whose numbers you're going to need when it gets down to the fall election. And if you're talking about reparations and free college tuition and abolishing the electoral college and a whole range of other extraordinarily extreme measures, that might get you somewhere in the Democratic primary, but I think it's going to poison your situation in the general election. It may turn out, Martha, that it'll poison your situation in the primaries as well.
Yeah.
But primaries depend on energy, and people willing to come out on cold nights in Iowa and trek through the snows of New Hampshire.
And you got to rile up the crowd, and you got to get people interested.
You do, and you got to raise money, and so it's possible. It seems to me that the old guard will rally here and get behind somebody like Amy Klobuchar or maybe even Joe Biden, but it hasn't happened yet.
I want to ask you about Bernie Sanders, who said this today. He's getting ready to release his tax returns. He says he's going to release 10 years. He's gotten a lot of heat for not doing that on the left. So here's what he said about why he is likely to show up as a millionaire on those tax returns. Watch this. Oh, it's a quote, so I will read it. Can we put it up? Where is it? There it is. Okay. I wrote a best-selling book, he declared. If you write a best-selling book, you can be a millionaire, too. What do you think about that, Brett?
Good for him for writing a best-selling book, and good for him for being able to sell it. That's capitalism.
That's what I was thinking. Sounds like a pretty good argument for capitalism from a socialist, doesn't it?
Yeah, it seems to me it is too. I don't begrudge him being a millionaire at all. What bothers me about him, and what I think will bother an awful lot of voters over time, is that he is running basically on a conspiracy theory in which he is given to say that the billionaire class in America, which is tiny in relation to the population, controls our economy, and increasingly, he says, controls our politics. I just don't think that's true. Yes, billionaires have their sources of influence. Mostly they profit from the economy. I don't think they control it. And I certainly don't think they control our politics. Yes, they have an influence, and many would argue they have more than they should, perhaps through campaign contributions, but they're not controlling it. That's a conspiracy theory. It's nutty. And to the extent that he believes that, it's worrisome, because you'd think, that a guy that's been around as long as he has and seen how the world really works would know better. He doesn't seem to. We're
going to ask him about that when we see him in Bethlehem on Monday night. Switching gears for a second.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that, Martha. That should be fun.
Yeah, we are definitely looking forward to it, too. It's going to be good. You've talked a lot about people throwing words and phrases around that are dangerous. These words and phrases to tag people with, like racist, and it feels like the new one that has a lot of attention is white nationalist. And you look at this tweet from Ilhan Omar. She called Stephen Miller, who works in the West Wing at the White House, a white nationalist. The fact that he still has influence on policy and political appointments is an outrage. And she just got pressed further on this on CNN, Britt, and here's what she had to say.
We're talking about someone who truly believes not a single refugee, a single immigrant should set foot on American soil. And I'm appalled by that, because unlike him and others, I haven't forgotten my roots.
What do you make of that, Brett?
Well, he may or may not have made that crack about refugees coming into America. He's certainly not said that he doesn't want any immigrants to come into America. Look, no doubt in my mind, Stephen Miller is a nationalist. But calling him a white nationalist is just another way of saying he's a racist. And look, there are people, I tend to be more of a liberal on immigration than a number of other people I know, especially conservatives. But I don't think those people are racist. And I don't think worrying about the levels of immigration and who may be coming in is racist. It may be racial in the sense that you're more worried about some group than others, but it's not racist. But that term, as you and I have talked about more than once, Martha, is flung about with abandon today. It is an absolutely terrible thing to say about somebody. And what it comes down to is this. There is an overwhelming consensus in America against racism. And if you, in politics, can successfully tag your opponent as racist, you can do great damage. And that is the temptation that politicians like Ilhan Omar face. And that is, if you can stick that label on somebody and make it stay, you can do great damage. And the temptation to do so ruthlessly is too great for too many people. Too great, it seems, for her and for too many others.
All right. Thank you so much, Britt. Great to see you tonight. Britt Hume.
The 2020 Democratic field is now leaning even further left with outspoken Trump critic Congressman Eric Swalwell jumping into the race. Basically, every Democrat trying to take on Trump is pushing radical socialist policies while at the same time attacking capitalism.
The only way to meet some of these historic challenges is to be able to use this engine of capitalism. Now, having said that, it is clearly an imperfect, unfair, unjust, and racist capitalist economy.
We are going to transform this economy and this government and create a system that works for all of us, not just the 1%.
I believe in capitalism. I see the wealth that can be produced, but let's be really clear. Capitalism without rules is theft.
Former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz is calling out these 2020 liberal contenders.
All these politicians who are crying about capitalism, have they ever made a payroll? Have they ever worked in a business? What have they done other than criticize the system? We do have a small crisis of capitalism. And what I mean by that is that the rules of engagement for a company today, given the fact that the government can't solve all these problems, is businesses and business leaders must do more for their employees and the communities they serve.
And we're just learning that Bernie Sanders says he's going to release his tax returns by Monday. He's, of course, downplaying the fact that he is a millionaire. Mr. Gutfeld, Bernie's a millionaire.
Yeah, you know, and who would have thought? But you know what? I'm glad he's a millionaire.
Me too.
I'm glad because everybody should do the best that they can. The platform that you run on should be about making a great system greater, not destroying the greatest system that's ever been created. They talk about inequality. Capitalism has done more about inequality than anything. If you look in history, everything has been unequal. At least capitalism gives you the opportunity to move from static income brackets. I've moved in every income bracket from nothing to something and back again. And almost all inequalities can be explained not by race, but by age. The median age for the Japanese Americans is decades higher than Hispanics. So they would have a higher income than Hispanics because they're 20 years on average older. Once you start looking at these inequality, these inequality arguments, they kind of fall apart. So you should be embracing capitalism and free markets because that makes the world a better place. Stop complaining, you babies.
It is interesting to see someone like Howard Schultz, a full-fledged capitalist, and running in the Democratic Party and lodging a lot of the
and he's very frustrated, right? So he is the largest job generator of his generation. And remember, when he came and did the first interview at Fox, he said that Liz Warren had come to him asking for a donation and that he had denied her that. So there's, you know, I know exactly, I can tell you exactly when Bernie Sanders is going to release his tax returns. I know exactly
when the Barr report comes out.
Exactly. As soon as the Barr report comes out, his press office is going to say, send out the tax returns, and no one will talk about it.
And that's why you were a press secretary. You definitely understand the timing. Dagan, what do you think? Capitalism under attack in the primary.
Well, if you go through everything that these major candidates have talked about, it's like hunka burning socialist pageant, right? That Elizabeth Warren loves wealth because she wants to confiscate it. That's her plan. It is full-on Soviet Union wealth confiscation.
Soviet Union?
Yeah, it's totally communist. We're going to come and take your money.
Wow.
Bernie Sanders, get rid of private insurance. He's going to have, I guess, an addendum to this plan, but he's essentially telling the American people we're going to kick 150 to 180 million people off their private insurance, and then Bernie and Liz and Kamala and Cory Booker get to decide what kind of health care you get. And then Eric Swalwell kind of went down the list. You know, he's the Ken doll of the bunch, trying to figure out which socialist policy hadn't been claimed yet, and now he's going for gun confiscation. So good luck with that. We do have a Constitution and a Second Amendment.
And we've already forgotten about Beto. That guy faded faster than
a speeding bullet?
Those don't fade, those will still kill you, Dave.
Yeah. You don't want to mess with
Okay,
those.
Juan, you know, all the Democrats had to do running against Donald Trump, just be normal and not go crazy, and they can't help themselves. They are going crazy.
I don't think they're going crazy at all. Most Americans think we have income inequality. But I wouldn't just say, let me start with Howard Schultz.
Okay.
Howard Schultz goodness gracious, he is so irrelevant to this whole conversation, except when it serves your purpose. Because guess what? He's not even running as a Democrat.
He's not?
He's not, and you thought so.
Independent?
Yeah, that's what he says right now. And guess what? You know, Howard Schultz, the only purpose he serves right now is to get Trump reelected, you know, to try to divide up support for Democrats.
Well, he says he isn't going to run he will only run if the Democrats elect somebody so far left.
In other words, yeah, so he's like, you know, kryptonite for Democrats. I don't get it. But anyway, the second point is about capitalism. And I think capitalism is very American. I'm a capitalist. But I also think there are rules. And rules are very American, like I believe
like a
in
border is a rule.
Yeah, like a Securities and Exchange Commission. Do you guys believe in that? Do you believe in things like
we have one.
They instituted that decades ago.
Right. So we have a Securities and Exchange Commission that puts limits on capitalist behavior, like we have a Federal Reserve that handles interest rates.
Again, that was like 100 years ago.
No, but you remember, these are all limits. Consumer protections, Elizabeth Warren, she's gotten a lot of attention with that. That's not 100 years ago.
But is anyone saying they're going to take those away?
Well, that's the point. We do not have unfettered capitalism that you guys want to sit here and celebrate. There are limits. And we believe in rules and limits.
They want to destroy
when you have
capitalism,
excesses.
not
they don't want to
enhance it.
destroy capitalism. They want capitalism that serves the people.
Taking away every American's private health insurance is not a rule.
Oh, get out of here. Yeah,
right.
Social Security. Oh, suddenly that's socialism?
No one's getting
that's our money.
Can I quickly say this? Bernie Sanders' political director, who spent part of her childhood in Venezuela, once told The Atlantic few years ago, it was better to live on poverty-level wages in a shanty town in Venezuela than on a garment worker salary in Elizabeth, New Jersey. This is one of the many, many socialists working on his team.
Yeah, the Millionaires campaign. Bernie Sanders, congrats.